We know that life often presents us with invisible wounds, the kind that don't bleed outwardly but tear at the soul. Rejection is one of these deep wounds, capable of stealing our peace, our self-esteem, and our hope. It can come in many forms: a broken relationship, a job opportunity that closes, or even the silence of those who should embrace us. But what if I told you that, even after the most painful rejection, God has a plan of love and restoration for us? That He is capable of raising us up, giving us dignity, and showing us a path of healing and hope? In this narrative, we will delve into a journey of faith, testimony, and prayer, discovering how heaven can lift us up when the earth knocks us down. Those of us who have lived a little longer know that life is a tangle of hellos and goodbyes, of embraces and partings. And amidst this journey, rejection is one of the most universal and profound pains we can experience. It's not just a no, it's a blow to our identity, a whisper that insinuates we're not good enough, that we don't belong, that we're not worthy of love and acceptance. The scars of rejection aren't visible to the eye, but they lodge in the soul, eroding self-esteem, undermining confidence, and planting seeds of insecurity. How many times have we found ourselves reliving moments when we were left out, ignored, or deliberately excluded? This silent pain can become a heavy burden, isolating us in our own anguish. I remember a phase when rejection became a constant shadow in my life. I had invested years in a relationship that, overnight, fell apart without clear explanations, leaving me heartbroken and my mind full of questions. It was as if a part of me had been ripped away, and I found myself alone, lost in a void that seemed endless. Every memory turned into a stab, and doubt hammered incessantly. Where did I go wrong? What is so wrong with me? The abandonment by the person I loved most was the trigger for an avalanche of negative feelings. I felt invisible, unwanted, incapable of being loved. The nights were long, filled with silent tears and a lump in my throat that made it hard to breathe. I lost my appetite, sleep vanished, and even activities that once brought me joy lost their meaning. I isolated myself from the world, ashamed of my vulnerability, afraid that others might see my pain and reject me again. I had minimal energy to even get out of bed, and the prospect of facing a new day was terrifying. Beyond the relationship, rejection also manifested in other areas of my life, such as a job opportunity I greatly desired. After several selection stages, the negative answer came, not as a no, but as a prolonged silence, a lack of feedback that was even more painful. I had dedicated myself intensely to that process, dreaming of the stability and professional fulfillment the position could bring. With each passing day without news, my hope dwindled, and the conclusion was always the same: I wasn't good enough. This sequence of rejections made me question my worth, my capabilities, and even my place in the world. I felt diminished, marginalized, as if I were a mistake waiting to happen. Joy became a stranger in my home, and melancholy settled in, deep and persistent. The emotional wounds deepened daily, and I found myself increasingly distant from the vibrant, life-filled person I once was. Sadness was a constant companion, and the feeling of being adrift, without a safe harbor, was overwhelming. But even at this emotional rock bottom, a silent cry began to echo in my soul. A desire, however faint, to find refuge, a cure for so much pain. It was the first step towards seeking something that transcends human understanding, something that could fill the void left by rejection. I needed an intervention, a hand to lift me up. Those of us who have experienced the sensation of a broken heart know it's a state of extreme vulnerability, where the soul is exposed in its rawest pain. It's in this moment that prayer becomes not just a refuge, but a cry from the soul that, despite being wounded, still believes in healing, honor, and hope. It's not an elaborate or perfect prayer, but a heartfelt plea born from the deepest pain, a total surrender of our fragility into the hands of the God who sees us in our entirety. It is the surrender of pain to the one who can transform it into strength. It was precisely in this broken-hearted state that I found myself, exhausted from crying, too weak to get up, with my self-esteem in tatters and my faith trembling at its foundation. I remember curling up in the corner of my room, my body heavy with sadness, and my soul lacerated by rejection. There were no more tears to shed, just an oppressive emptiness and continuous pain. It was then that, With a thread of a voice, I uttered a prayer that came from the deepest part of my being, a prayer that didn't seek beautiful words, but the sincerity of a heart that felt utterly abandoned. I said, with every cell of my body crying out for help, God, I can't bear this pain anymore. I feel broken, wounded, worthless. I was rejected by those I loved, ignored by those from whom I expected support, and I feel completely alone. I know that you are the God who embraces, who heals wounds, who restores dignity. I place before you all my pain, all my hurt, all my feeling of not being good enough. Please, Lord, heal my soul. Restore my worth, my self-esteem. Teach me to see myself as you see me, loved, valuable, worthy. Remove from me this feeling of abandonment and fill me with your unconditional love. I cry out for healing for the wounds of rejection that tear at my heart, for restoration for my identity, which has been shaken. I ask you that your honor fall upon me where there was dishonor. May hope sprout again in my heart, where before there was only despair. Empower me to forgive those who rejected me and to forgive myself for carrying this burden for so long. Help me rebuild my life on the rock of your truth and not on the shifting sands of human approval. I trust in you, Lord, even when the pain is too great to bear. I know that you are the God who lifts me up, who gives me a new song, who transforms my mourning into dancing. May your power manifest in my life. May every tear be transformed into a seed of faith, and may your name be glorified through my complete restoration. In Jesus' name, I pray and trust. Amen. This prayer, uttered with every fiber of my being, with the intensity of someone who has nothing left to lose, was a turning point. It wasn't as if the pain magically disappeared, but it was as if a crack of light opened in the darkness. A sense of peace, a strange quietude, began to envelop me, something I hadn't felt in a long time. The prayer gave me the certainty that I was not alone in this battle, that there was a God who heard me, who saw me, and who deeply cared about my pain. It was an act of surrender and trust, a moment when I finally handed over the reins of my suffering to God, allowing him to begin the healing process. And from that point on, things began to move in ways I never could have imagined, in directions my limited mind couldn't conceive. The seed of healing, planted in that moment of surrender, began to germinate, promising a harvest of dignity and love. Those of us who have been at the bottom of the pit of rejection know that the way back is gradual. Healing isn't a light switch that turns on, it's a process, and the first signs are like small lights in the tunnel of despair, indicating that the sun is about to rise again. After that intense prayer, that cry that sprang from my wounded soul, I began to perceive subtly that something was changing within me and around me. It wasn't a dramatic and immediate transformation, but a series of events and feelings that together began to rekindle the flame of hope in my heart. The first sign came in the form of an unusual desire to reconnect. I, who had completely isolated myself, began to feel a slight urge to interact with people again. An old friend with whom I had lost contact called me out of the blue, inviting me for coffee. At first, the idea scared me, but something inside me prompted me to accept. In that meeting, without me needing to detail all my pain, she simply listened to me with kindness, offered words of affection, and reminded me of my worth. That conversation, seemingly simple, was like a balm for my wounded soul. I felt a warmth in my heart that I hadn't experienced in a long time, a sense that I wasn't alone, and that there were still people who cared about me. Furthermore, I began to notice a change in my own perception. Before, I saw the world through the lens of rejection. Everything seemed gray and meaningless. Now, small beauties began to emerge. A ray of sunshine streaming through the window, the bird's song in the morning, the taste of a simple meal. These were details I had ignored for so long, but which now brought me small moments of gratitude. I started looking at myself in the mirror with a little more gentleness, noticing that despite the dark circles and paleness, there was still a strength within me. The act of caring for myself, which was once a heavy obligation, began to become a gesture of affection, a recognition that I deserved love, including my own. Little by little, I resumed habits that made me feel good, like reading a book, listening to inspiring music, and even taking short walks. These first signs were like seeds of healing planted in the barren soil of my soul. They showed me that even when the pain of rejection seems overwhelming, God is working behind the scenes, preparing the ground for our restoration. Each small victory, each ray of light, strengthened my faith and gave me the certainty that healing was possible. It was as if my soul, once dormant from suffering, was slowly awakening, feeling the warmth of the sun and preparing to bloom again. Hope, once a distant luxury, became a palpable reality, an invitation to keep believing in God's ability to rewrite my story. Those of us who have gone through rejection know that it not only steals our peace, but also our dignity, our sense of self-worth. It's as if a veil of shame covers us, making us feel unworthy of anything good. But the God whom we serve is the God who restores dignity, who brings honor where there was dishonor, and who reminds us of our inestimable worth. After those first signs of healing, God's hand began to work more deeply, restoring what I thought I had lost forever: my dignity and my honor. One of the most painful aspects of the rejection I experienced was the feeling of being discarded as something unimportant. I carried a burden of shame, believing that the fault was with me. However, as I delved deeper into my journey of faith and my relationship with God, I began to comprehend a fundamental truth. My worth is not determined by the opinions or actions of others, but by God's unconditional love. He created me in His image and likeness, loved me even before I was born, and His love does not depend on my performance or human approval. This revelation was a turning point. It was as if a foggy mirror was cleaned, and I could finally see myself through God's eyes. This new perspective brought with it a courage I didn't know I possessed. I began to position myself differently, not letting others' gazes or comments weigh me down. I realized that the respect I sought from others should, first and foremost, come from myself. In a moment of great vulnerability, I decided to seek professional help to address the roots of my low self-esteem, a step that previously seemed unthinkable. During this therapeutic process, with God's guidance, I was able to revisit the wounds of the past, understand them, and finally begin to heal them. It wasn't easy. There were moments of great pain and confrontation, but each session was a step toward liberation. Furthermore, God began to honor me in unexpected ways in my professional environment. The position I hadn't gotten, which brought me so much pain, was replaced by a new opportunity that arose organically, without me having to search intensely. A company with values aligned with mine invited me to be part of a significant project, and I realized that it wasn't just a job, but a recognition of my talent and dedication. There, I found an environment of respect, where my ideas were valued and my presence was welcomed. This new professional phase not only brought stability and a new purpose, but also a validation of my work and my capabilities, something the previous rejection had stolen from me. God was, in fact, bringing honor where there had been dishonor, showing that He is capable of reversing any situation and raising us above all pain and humiliation. Each day, I felt my dignity being restored, brick by brick, and the certainty that I was loved and valuable, regardless of the circumstances, became deeply rooted in my heart. Those of us who have experienced the depth of rejection know that it doesn't just affect the mind or the heart, but our emotional structure as a whole. It's as if the soul felt raw, sensitive to every touch, every word. However, the process of emotional renewal is one of the most beautiful miracles God performs in us. It is the reconstruction of an inner temple, the healing of the deepest wounds, culminating in an inner peace that surpasses all human understanding. After the restoration of my dignity, I realized that God's action was deepening in my soul, healing layer upon layer of accumulated pain. Anxiety, once a constant tenant in my mind, bringing unfounded worries and a paralyzing fear of the future, began to dissipate, like morning mist that clears under the first rays of sun. The nights, which were once a torment of insomnia and intrusive thoughts about the past and losses, transformed into moments of deep and restorative rest. I could finally sleep in peace, without the heavy burden of resentment and self-criticism. The fear of being judged, of being abandoned again, which prevented me from opening myself to new experiences and relationships, was gradually replaced by a serene confidence, a certainty that I was protected and guided. It was a peace that didn't depend on external circumstances, but sprang from a deep place within me, a constant presence of God. I began to reconnect with my own essence, with the person God created me to be, before the marks of rejection defined me. I discovered new hobbies, new passions, and rediscovered joy in simple things that once went unnoticed. Reading, music, walking outdoors, all of this gained new meaning and became nourishment for my soul. My interpersonal relationships also blossomed. I was more patient with people, more empathetic, able to listen without judging and offer support without feeling drained. Laughter returned more frequently and authentically, and I felt lighter, freer, as if a heavy burden had been removed from my shoulders. Those around me began to notice the difference, the sparkle in my eyes, the serenity in my countenance. This emotional transformation was not an isolated event, but a continuous process of surrender and trust in God. I learned to surrender every worry, every wound, every fear to Him. And in return, I received a peace that the human mind cannot comprehend. This peace allowed me to forgive, not only those who rejected me, but also myself for having carried so much guilt and shame for so long. Emotional renewal gave me a new perspective on life, on my purpose, and on God's unconditional love. It was a profound healing that reached the roots of my soul and allowed me to live in fullness, with the certainty that, even in the face of new challenges, I would be grounded on the rock, with a peace that transcends everything. It is proof that God not only heals us, but transforms us completely, from the inside out, so that we can flourish and shine again. Those of us who have experienced such a profound miracle, a rescue of the soul, feel an irresistible impulse to share our story. It's more than just a recounting. It's a living testimony to God's love and power. And I have an incredibly captivating testimony that makes me reflect daily on the greatness and faithfulness of the one who lifted me up when I was down. I vividly remember the period when rejection consumed me, when I felt like a boat adrift on a stormy sea, without a compass or sails. The pain was so intense that it seemed impossible to overcome. My greatest pain came from a significant relationship that ended abruptly and painfully. I felt completely discarded, like a worthless object. This rejection wasn't just the breaking of a bond, it unearthed old childhood wounds, where I felt the absence and disinterest of important figures. I carried the belief that I was inherently insufficient, unlovable, and that rejection was my destiny. The shame was overwhelming, and I hid from the world, afraid to expose myself and be hurt again. My days were gray, and my nights, filled with nightmares and anguish, constantly reminded me of my loneliness. I reached a point where the idea of a happy life seemed like a distant, unattainable mirage. At my rock bottom, exhausted from fighting and suffering in silence, I uttered that desperate prayer I mentioned, surrendering every piece of my broken heart to God. And believe me, we are witnesses that God acts in ways that surpass our understanding. Amidst my pain, I began to feel a subtle yet powerful presence. It wasn't an audible voice, but a deep conviction in my spirit. You are loved. You are valuable. I chose you. This was the first seed of healing, the first crack in the wall of pain I had built around myself. The miracle began to manifest in unexpected ways. First, a new job opportunity arose in a completely different field, one I had never even considered. The company valued potential and a willingness to learn, not just previous experience. I was accepted into an environment that promoted growth and mutual respect, something that made me feel honored and valued for the first time in a long time. It was as if God was giving me a new professional beginning, showing me that I had a purpose and a place in the world. But the greatest miracle was the restoration of my heart. Through a process of therapy, accompanied by much prayer and study of God's Word, I began to deconstruct the limiting beliefs that rejection had planted in me. I discovered that my identity wasn't tied to human acceptance, but to divine acceptance. I began to understand that God never rejected me, that His love for me was unconditional and eternal. This process of inner healing gave me the strength to forgive, not only those who caused me pain, but most importantly myself for having blamed myself for so long. The peace that flooded me was indescribable, and the sparkle in my eyes returned, a sparkle of hope and renewal. The pinnacle of the miracle came when, after a long period of healing and self-discovery, I found a new relationship. It wasn't something I actively sought, but something God brought into my life at the right time. A love that accepts me for who I am, that honors me, that supports me, and that reminds me every day of my worth. This relationship is living proof of God's restoration, showing that He transforms pain into purpose, rejection into a testimony of unwavering love. I am the woman who was rejected, yes, but who was lifted by heaven with a love so great it overflows, transforming every scar into a reminder of God's faithfulness. It is proof that for God, nothing is impossible, and that He can rewrite any story, no matter how dark it may seem, with an ending of hope and fulfillment. Those of us who have witnessed God's transformative work in our lives, especially after the pain of rejection, are invited to deep and continuous reflection. What have we truly learned from all of this? What are the eternal lessons we can draw from this journey of faith, pain, and miracles? We learn, above all, about the immeasurable power of divine acceptance. Human rejection can bring us down, make us feel unworthy and valueless, but God's love is the only truth that can lift us up and establish us in our identity. He accepts us completely and unconditionally, with all our imperfections and wounds, and this acceptance is the foundation of our true healing. The most important lesson we can take from this experience is the understanding that our worth is not determined by human approval. For a long time, we tend to seek validation in the opinions of others, in the acceptance of a group, in the reciprocity of a relationship. However, the pain of rejection forces us to look inward, and more importantly, upward. It is the certainty that we are loved and chosen by God, regardless of circumstances, that frees us from the chains of insecurity and the need to please at all costs. This truth becomes our unshakable rock, the source of our self-esteem and our confidence. Another crucial point that emerges from this experience is the importance of forgiveness and self-compassion. Rejection often leads us to blame ourselves, to self-condemn, perpetuating the pain. Learning to forgive those who rejected us, freeing ourselves from resentment, is a fundamental step toward healing. But equally important is learning to have compassion for ourselves, to accept ourselves with our fragilities, and to treat ourselves with the same love and kindness we would offer to a friend. This self-love, nurtured by divine acceptance, is a pillar of emotional renewal. It is when we forgive ourselves that healing deepens and inner peace flourishes. And finally, practical hope. Not a vague hope, but a conviction that God acts in the concrete, in the real, transforming our story and giving us a new future. Even when the soul's wounds are deep, hope in God drives us to seek help, to reconnect with people who love us, to invest in our well-being, and to live with purpose. Our lives are a living testimony that God does not fail. He is the provider of healing, the restorer of souls, the giver of dignity. He cares about every tear, every pain, every sigh. May this reflection inspire us to trust Him even more, to surrender ourselves completely to His will, knowing that He is capable of doing infinitely more than all we ask or imagine, and that His plans for us are always of peace, of hope, and of a glorious future, where rejection transforms into a testimony of His infinite grace. Those of us who have come this far in this journey of reflection and testimony realize that the rebirth of hope after rejection is more than an isolated event. It is a continuous invitation to wholeness and a deeper connection with the divine. The experience of being rejected can trap us in a cycle of pain and insecurity, but God offers us a path to liberation that leads to a transformed life. The specific promise of transformation, be it the restoration of self-esteem, the healing of deep emotional wounds, or the reunion with one's true identity, is fulfilled when we open ourselves to the action of the Holy Spirit in our lives, allowing Him to heal and redefine us. We firmly believe that spiritual renewal and emotional stability for adults over 40 are essential for us to live a life with purpose and meaning. It is at this stage of life that we often reevaluate our choices and seek a deeper sense. It is not about empty religiosity, but about a practical hope that manifests in every area of our existence. It is the unshakable certainty that God sustains us in every step, guides us in every decision, and provides us with the love and strength necessary to overcome any adversity. This renewal empowers us to face life's challenges with resilience, knowing that we are not alone in the battle, but that we have a loving Father who embraces us and lifts us up. It gives us the wisdom to make healthy choices and the courage to embrace a new tomorrow, free from the shackles of the past. Therefore, we want to invite you with an open heart to take the next step in your own journey of healing and renewal. Reflect deeply. What are the voices of rejection that still echo in your mind? What are the wounds that still need God's healing? Allow the story we shared today, this testimony of overcoming and unwavering love, to be a catalyst for your own transformation. Surrender your pains, your fears, and your insecurities to God. Pray with sincerity, with a bare soul, and trust that He is faithful to fulfill His promises in your life, rewriting your story with love and dignity. Remember, God is always ready to surprise us, to go beyond our expectations, and to guide us on a path of healing, peace, and wholeness. May this message be a beacon of hope in your life, illuminating your steps and leading you to experience the fullness of divine acceptance and the joy of a renewed soul. May you, from today, live a life of gratitude, trust, and purpose, knowing that heaven has lifted you up and that God's love will never reject you.